Welcome to episode 249 of the Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy. In today's episode, I'm excited to welcome Ayelet Fishbach and Cassie Holmes to discuss how you can have the best year ever. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. Happy almost New Year. This is the last episode of 2022 coming out on December 30th. And what a year it has been. My second book, What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You, came out in October. And I got to do a book signing at the Sam's Club Auditorium, which was amazing. The first book came out in the midst of COVID, so I didn't get to do any signings or anything when it came out. It was so awesome to see my book for the first time at that event in Arkansas. Thank you to Next Up for having me out for that amazing day and experience. In addition to that, 46 different guests have joined me on the show this year, including those in today's interview. And we started doing 2 episodes a week, which made it so we're going to kick off the new year with episode 250, which is super cool and fun. I wish I could say I planned it that way, but it's more serendipitous than anything. I also got to speak at some amazing conferences, including travel to Amsterdam and multiple groups in Latin America. I had students from around the world in the certificate program at Texas A&M, got to work with amazing clients, and so much more. I can't wait to see what 2023 has in store. One of the things I'm most excited for is to speak at South by Southwest in Austin in March, along with some of the guests you've already heard on the show, including Dolly Chugh, who was just here with me a couple weeks ago talking about her book, A More Just Future, another that's hopefully going to be coming in early 2023. We haven't recorded that one yet, so I can't talk about it yet, but it's going to be a good one. I'm still a bit in shock that I was invited to speak at South by Southwest. It's going to be so surreal to be there, and I hope to see you there too. If you're planning to go, please reach out to me and let me know. You can find me on the socials as the Brainy Biz. I've already had at least, a dozen or half a dozen people reach out, and can't wait to see everyone in person. Speaking of 2023 being an amazing year, that's what this episode is all about. I've done something a little bit different in this episode in bringing on 2 guests to do a panel of sorts. One of them you've met before, Ayelet Fishbach, professor of behavioral science and marketing at the University of Chicago and author of Get It Done, which came out earlier this year. Funny enough, I unintentionally bookended 2022 with Ayelet, as she was my guest on the very first and now last episode of the year. And I think that's a perfect way to begin and end any year with Ayelet. The main reason I reached out to her to come back for this episode, other than her being awesome, is because her interview has quickly zoomed its way up the rankings to be the 5th most downloaded episode of all time on the podcast. The only other interview in the top 10 is my conversation with Robert Cialdini, so that's saying something. I knew you would like to hear from Ayelet again, and she was gracious enough to join me today, along with our other panelist, Cassie Holmes. Cassie is a professor at UCLA who wrote the new book Happier Hour, which is so beyond fantastic. She specializes in the science of happiness and talks about time poverty and so many other amazing things. Don't worry, we will have a full interview that's all about Cassie and her book and her work coming out very early in 2023. And I do want to thank and give a little shout out to Katie Milkman from Wharton for introducing me to Cassie. So glad to be able to include her and have her part of the Brainy Business family, both Katie and Cassie and all those other 45 guests from this past year. So this panelist style is a new format for the podcast. In that way, I would really love to hear from you and how you feel about it once you've had a chance to listen. I know it's not the only time you've ever heard a panel, but it's not the way we've done this on the podcast before. And it's also not the first time I've had more than one guest. The reason this is different is because these two haven't necessarily ever worked together, or if we continue this format, may have never even met before. Today, I've brought together 2 people from different universities studying somewhat different, though arguably related topics. in this case, motivation and happiness, to have a discussion about how their work complements or sometimes might contradict one another and what their advice is on a particular topic. In today's episode, that topic is having the best, happiest year by understanding the science of motivation, goals, achievement, happiness, mindset, our thoughts towards time, and more. I really enjoyed this style of episode and plan to look for other opportunities to have more combined ones like this in the future. But let me know what you think. Do you like this style? What topics would you like to learn more about in 2023 and beyond? Let me know on social media, where you can find me as The Brainy Biz, or send me an email, melina@thebrainybusiness.com, to let me know. One last thing before we get right into the episode, I want to be sure you know that there are links to all sorts of things, including past episodes, related books, both Cassie's and Ayelet's, and Katie's, of course, as well as ways to get in contact with them, and so much more. It's all in the show notes for this episode, which are waiting for you within the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/249. Now let's jump right in. Ayelet, Cassie, welcome to the Brainy Business Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So we were talking this is a fun experiment into this sort of panel approach to the podcast. So of course, for everyone listening, definitely let me know after the fact what you think of this format. But as we get started here, we will have you each introduce yourselves and tell a little bit about your background for everyone who's going to be listening here today. Ayelet, since you've been here before, let's go ahead. We'll let you go first, but we'll still assume that people haven't yet heard that episode as you introduce who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm a motivation scientist. I am also a faculty member or professor at the University of Chicago, where I study motivation and decision making. And almost last year, I published the book, Get It Done, Surprising Lessons from the Science of Motivation.
Yes. And as I had mentioned to Ayelet when I reached out to her about this episode, her episode about her book, Get It Done, has quickly risen through the ranks of 4.5 years worth of episodes to be the 5th most downloaded episode ever of the podcast. So I know many, many of you listening have already listened to that. And one, you should re-listen because it's a great episode and lots of great tips. And everyone who hasn't yet listened should go and check that out for sure. So our other guest is Cassie. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yes. Hello. I am Cassie Holmes, professor at UCLA's Anderson School of Management, and I study happiness and life satisfaction, and in particular, focusing on the role of time. Pulling together my research, I just published a book, Happier Hour, How to Beat Distraction, Expand Your Time, and Focus on What Matters Most. And it's based off of a course that I teach to our MBAs and our executive MBAs called Applying the Science of Happiness to Life Design. And so, yeah, I focus on our satisfaction sort of following and happiness following the choices that we make. And I'm excited to be here and to be with one of my wonderful colleagues, Ayelet.
Yay. And everyone who is now thinking, woo, that book sounds interesting and I can't wait to hear more about that. Don't worry. I have already looped Cassie in for her own solo episode where we will be talking about Happier Hour. And it's funny. I always feel like I want to say the happier hour. Do you have people say that a lot when they talk about the book or not really?
Well, it's funny, not really, but it's very important that it's not the
I know that's what
hour because it's really about how to sort of make all of our hours a little bit more happier, with the idea that those hours sum up to our years in our life overall. So we're going for not just one good one, but a lot of them.
Yes. I feel like though someday if you do end up with a show, maybe it should be the happier hour, that you're talking
right,
about.
Each week. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're here to talk about today, perhaps this is our first happier hour, is to be able to, as we think about the new year. So this episode is going to be coming out on December 30th. This is the time of year where people are thinking about resolutions and goal setting and how they're going to do better next year. And year in, year out, that, I do this every single year, just like everyone else. We talk about resolutions and how they fail and people don't succeed with the changes that they want to be making. And so I thought it would be fun to just have a little conversation about how we can help people to have better, happier, more successful years, that 2023 will be the time that they actually do some stuff. So where are some points where you see that people have, pitfalls, that they don't adhere to what they were going to? Where are people more likely to mess up, as we look at having those better, happier years?
So I'm not sure in which order we should go here. Let me talk a bit about what we know about resolutions specifically, but we can also talk about goals more generally. First, people set them. So people do use the new year to think about what is it that I want to accomplish. And we have now collected data from people in the US and in China with the Chinese New Year, and around the time when the year ends and the new one begins, people are thinking about what they want to achieve this year. Now, when we follow up on people's resolutions, it's not that all resolutions are being ditched, but there is a decent likelihood that you will forget about your resolution. We followed up between February to the following November, and found that most people ditch the resolutions by the following year, but about 20% were still doing this. We're still sticking with what they were planning to do. And what was unique about these people, and actually about their resolutions, is they were intrinsically motivating, that these people identified something that feels good while you do it. Now, it's not that they set a resolution to eat more ice cream and watch more TV. Okay? They set meaningful resolutions. Okay? These were things that they were not doing and they were hoping to do more of, but they were also things that were immediately rewarding in the sense that they felt right, that they felt good, that they didn't feel like they are forcing themselves to do something. Sometimes they have the initial nudge, okay, just for yourself to start on it, but then it felt right for them. So let's hear Cassie's thoughts, but I would just start with this tip. Like you need to find something that feels right when you do it, not only when you achieve it. You don't want to just be the person who did it. You want to be the person who's doing it.
Yeah. And I actually think before getting into that sort of forecasting and planning and goal setting going into the new year, I think the end of the year is really a wonderful opportunity to reflect back on the prior year. And in doing so, it can actually be really illuminating about what, like if you are planning to make some changes going forward, what those might be. And interestingly, you don't even have to, it's a lovely opportunity to reflect back on the year in total. Oftentimes that generates a wonderful sense of gratitude. I know that this isn't going to air until close to the New Year's, but we are talking as we're approaching Thanksgiving, which is another sort of holiday and opportunity that sort of encourages folks to reflect, particularly on what they're thankful for. But in thinking back over the entire year, it's oftentimes people experience a sense of regret if they haven't invested on things that really matter to them. And in some cases, those are goal related or sort of at the face, like achievement oriented. But in many cases, it's actually things that are, well, investing in their relationships, the folks in their life who sort of really matter to them, investing in the work that is aligned with what they truly care about and purpose. It's so easy for us to sort of be in this sort of constant state of reacting and responding to what's urgent, irrespective of the importance of those things. And then when you're looking back at the year, you're like, oh my gosh, I was so darn busy, but did I actually invest in and make progress on those things that truly matter to me? Again, oftentimes the things that get neglected are relationships. And it's understandable because we are so often so busy. So I do work looking at time poverty. So this acute feeling of having too much to do and not enough time to do it. In a national poll that we recently conducted, we found that nearly half of Americans feel this way. And the reason I bring it up is because when we feel like we're constantly in a rush, when we are in that hurry that we don't feel like we have enough time, that's what leads us to be more reactive in how we invest our time as opposed to proactive and investing on those things that really matter. So having sort of taken that first step of reflecting back on the year, what are those things that you're grateful for? What are those ways of spending your time that really did elicit great sense of joy, great sense of satisfaction, great sense of fulfillment? What are those things that you regret perhaps not having spent it time on, having perhaps neglected? And with that clarity, then that can help you devise what are some changes that you might want to make in the new year? How should I be prioritizing my time? And once you see what are those things that matter, okay, into my schedule, how can I put those things into my schedule first, protect the time so that at least and the next year, the end of 2023, when you're reflecting back, you're like, yes, I did invest on those things that really matter to me.
Melina, can I refer to Cassie's thoughts?
Of course, yeah.
I just love what you said. I would also say that it's interesting, Melina, that you brought us together here, because other than that, I just love Cassie's work. She's also one of the leading researchers on happiness and what makes people feel good. Whereas I think of myself as someone who's studying motivation and how to reach someone's goals. And you can think about goals as something that feeds into emotion. Okay, so I do things so I will feel good about myself and I will feel good about life. You can also think about emotions as something that feeds into goals. Okay, that when I feel good, I know that I achieved something. I get some feedback. When I feel regret, which Cassie just referred to, regret is a major input for goal pursuit. When I feel that I have not done enough, that can motivate action. So it's kind of interesting to think about this tension about how much your emotions inform what you do, and what you do then translates into your emotional experiences. It's also really fun for me to see the connection. I also find in my research that it's a really good idea to look back. So yes, I endorse this. And what we find is that looking back is often a way to reaffirm your commitment. And, we sometimes think about this as a mistake. Okay, looking back, it's like sunk cost. Okay, what does it matter? Okay, just look ahead, just keep your eyes on the prize. But no, it is not a mistake. And it's often a way to figure out what's important for you in life and how much you value something because you have invested in it, because you're already working toward it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Cassie, we're definitely on the same wavelength. So Tuesday's episode, so we're talking here, it's a Friday. So episode 236 that came out just a couple days ago is called The Brainy Benefits of Gratitude. And at this time of year, I always, like I said, I talk about reciprocity. I talk about gratitude, happiness, gratefulness, goal setting. Like this is my time. November, December really, really focuses on that, and some January as well. And so that will be linked, as well as my interview with Dan Pink talking about the power of regret, which of course is very much tied in with what we were talking about here. So when we look at like you were saying there, Ayelet, this kind of like push and pull of, so we want to make every hour a little bit happier, but maybe as we're looking at motivation, there's some of the, we have to reflect on the things where maybe there was some anguish or something to be looking forward as we look at, maybe where people get hung up or start to slip up maybe as we get a little bit into the year. So Cassie, you were recommending to, take some time now and reflect on what you haven't done and maybe put some time on the calendar through the year to be setting that aside. Where do people then mess up? Where do they get stuck and kind of stop doing what they should do?
Well, many of us, we get stuck pretty quickly, okay? And we get stuck because we've set a goal that was a good idea until we actually started to do it. And so we often see what we researchers refer to as the empathy gap, which is the planner is planning to do something which the doer, there's just no way. Okay, that it doesn't feel good. Okay, my planner, maybe thought that next year I'm going to run a marathon, but I might hate running. Okay, and feel much more comfortable when I do my whatever scalp exercise, and so understanding that you need to set your goals, thinking about what you can see yourself doing right now, okay, what will make you feel good right now. And again, feel good or like feeling happy. It's not just about the momentary feeling. It's more about feeling that I'm growing, feeling that I'm satisfied with what I'm doing. That would be the first thing to watch for. The other thing that I would mention is that a year has a very long middle. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's it's in the middle when we are going to lose our motivation. And so you set a goal for the year, but for many of our goals, this is just not the right time frame for exercising goal, which I just used as an example because the majority of the people in our samples usually have something related to health as the New Year resolutions. Probably thinking about that in terms of a weekly goal or a monthly goal is better. There is less of a middle, and we know that middles are not good for motivation.
That is potentially my new favorite quote, Ayelet. A year has a very long middle, which I would say is from like January 15th to December 23rd or something. It's like the middle there. So that's great. I really love that. Cassie, what would you add to that?
Yeah. And I also want to sort of highlight, as Ayelet pointed out, that when we're sort of using even the term happiness, both of us are not just talking about how you feel in every moment, that just sort of simple sense of enjoyment. There is also this evaluative component, cognitive component of feeling satisfied about and being happy about. And that's where you really sort of pick up on this marriage between sense of progress and achievement and purpose and like high order goals that align with our sense of satisfaction and broader emotional well-being. Now, in terms of places that folks mess up, and I don't know, I actually haven't spent enough time thinking about how this relates exactly to what Ayelet just said. But I think that one of the things that folks mess up on is thinking hour by hour and looking to, I mean, even as you said before, Melina, of like, wanting every hour to be happier. I think that's actually the mistake of thinking hour by hour and making every hour just sort of like right now, putting a lot of pressure on it to make it perfect. We actually find in our research that folks who take a broader perspective of time, thinking about years and actually their life overall, as opposed to hour by hour, report greater meaning in life, greater satisfaction, as well as happier. They're happier in their days. And the reason for that is by taking this broader perspective of time, it highlights those things that are really important, not just these little goals about, like that are upcoming and immediate, but really broader goals of like, what is my purpose? What do I truly value? And with that clarity of what's important, then folks spend their hours accordingly. So I mean, maybe this is what relates to motivation is like, once you realize what's important, this, from this broader perspective, then it becomes clear how you should invest your time and perhaps makes you sort of more likely to behave in ways that are in line with these higher order goals and purpose. I would say also another way that folks mess up as they're thinking about time and time management in particular is that sort of so often people think about it in terms of efficiency, of like getting as many things possible done just to check it off of the list and get it done as quickly, efficiently as possible. And I actually think, and I would very much encourage folks to think about time management, not about efficiency as the goal, but really about investing time in ways that are worthwhile. And worthwhile, sometimes that can take more time. And to make the time truly worthwhile while you're spending it too, you're not thinking about checking it off the list and what's next. Instead, it actually involves you being fully engaged in the time that you're spending. So it's both like the particular activity that you're engaging in, but also how you're engaging in that activity is what makes the time worthwhile.
I love that. Ayelet, you look like maybe you have additional thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'm trying to think whether I can just like say what I want without being asked. But
of course
I'll
you
go
can.
For it.
I say this is your show now. You're both leading the charge here for sure.
Just everything that Cassie says resonates so much with me, and I want to respond to this. And I find it very interesting to think about the attraction of checking things off your list and even making a list. So, just a fun story is that when I went over way too many possible covers for my book, one of the covers that was offered for me had a checklist with kind of check marks next to it. And I was like, oh no, like there is no way I can go with it because I never talk about making the list. And I don't endorse having such list. And the reason is that when you're navigating your own motivation, you are not your employee. Okay? You are the boss. Okay? And so you constantly need to navigate the motivational priorities of your goals. Okay? You constantly need to decide what is the most important to do with my day, with my week, okay? With my year, as we are now at the beginning of a year. And so you cannot just go and complete tasks on the list. You are constantly prioritizing them. And that was what you saw on my face that I wanted to say.
I love it. I think it's so funny. So yeah, go Cassie, go. No,
I was just saying that is like, absolutely. We have to be not only sort of motivated to get the things done, but of being very clear in defining what are those things that we want to invest in the first place. And there's great sense of agency that but also responsibility, right, in making those decisions. And, if like perhaps regret comes in some cases from not having completed the items on your list, but having the wrong list devised almost. And so I think I love that idea of, well, I think it's really important to also consider what you're putting on your list, and being very clear and thoughtful about that.
Well, one of the things that I say to people, so if we have 10 things on the to-do list, it feels good to have a lot of things on a to-do list. Our brains like this idea of how productive I'm going to be. I'm going to get all the things done. And then inevitably you only get 3 of them done. But, we then think, oh, but because I got through these 3 big things tomorrow, I can do all 17 that are on tomorrow's list, right? And we keep moving and moving and moving. But like you were saying, Cassie, you get stuck on the little stuff that doesn't really matter and trying to churn through a bunch of work that's actually probably unimportant stuff. And we're distracted through all of it and not getting a lot of value out of the stuff that we are doing. Whereas if you have just one important thing that's going to be helping me to be moving forward toward this bigger goal or this life purpose and, whatever it is, just can actually be a snowball that builds in this really positive way that you don't get when there's too much stuff. So along those lines.
Yeah. And actually, before you frame a question on that, because I think what you're saying is really important to highlight, is that actually a to-do list can also be a source of distraction away from those higher order goals that, it's almost like productive procrastination, but it's so easy, when you have a big task in front of you, like I can say for me, like a big morning of writing, I often get I allow myself to go through those little things on the list of like responding to email, and I'll just do this one little thing that is on my list because it makes me feel like I'm being productive. I'm checking something off. But really what it's doing is helping me procrastinate from the important work that's in front of me. And so I think it is, again, like to the importance of highlighting the content of the list, and waiting and being aware of which items are, like really the ones that you have to prioritize and dedicate time to, and not let all of this other little things that we even fill on. Like sometimes I'll even add things on my list as a way to procrastinate. I'm like, oh, I have to get this done. And then I do it quickly so that I feel like I'm being productive. Again, procrastinating from what I'm actually meant to be doing.
Yes, definitely. When I talk about this, so one, I use the term productive procrastination all the time, where I'm talking about bike shedding, right? So and I've got 4 episodes I'll be linking in the show notes for when I talk about this, which the 4 things that I say work against us here is optimism bias, time discounting, planning fallacy, and bike shedding, all keep us to where it feels like we're doing something, tomorrow's going to be better, and we just keep doing a bunch of unimportant stuff that's not actually helping us to get to the goals. And like you said, Cassie, being able to have, and Ayelet too, of course, but more thoughtfulness about what really matters. And then we can get rid of the stuff that feels important otherwise if we didn't spend enough time thinking about what we care about. So what I was going to say is, for the audience that's listening, I know for a fact that there are a lot of people that are to-do list people. There are a lot of checklist people that listen to this show and that are potentially screaming at this idea of being told that a checklist is bad for them. So what else can we say on this to help them to be maybe recovering to-do listers, on the other side, to know that this is not what they should be doing? What would you tell them to help them to realize that checklists are bad, quote unquote?
So it's good to know that we have these people in the audience, because what they teach us is that progress is motivating and progress feels good. And often your checklist is what makes you feel good. And my favorite example is my like one of the people in a nearby office, I will not mention her name, who I once caught putting something on her to-do list and then crossing it out. Okay, in the same, like not
was it
writing
me?
it.
Was I in the office next to you doing that?
Let's call her Melina.
Okay, sounds
okay?
good.
And so I was intrigued by this, like Melina's behavior. Like, why would you bother writing something and crossing it out? And she nicely reflected on how that makes her feel like she accomplished something, and this is a sense of progress. And you know what? We sometimes adopt these like silly goals, these goals that are basically just challenging ourselves because it feels better to move, to make progress, to do something. Okay. And so this is great. I did not mean to say that we should not set goals and then monitor progress. We should monitor progress. We should look back at how much we have achieved. We should look ahead to see how much is still missing. The issue is that while we are doing that, we are also setting these goals. We're also renegotiating these goals. So you cannot just get into the mindset of, I am going to forever work on that list that I created at one point in the year. You need to renegotiate priorities and make sure that you get to what is important for you. And one way to do that is by asking the questions why and how. Okay. And so, you want to ask why you're doing the thing that you're doing. Okay. Why did you take this class? Okay. Why do you care about getting a good grade there? And then why do you even want to get whatever the certificate that you're going to get out of this class? But then you also want to ask how, okay? And at one point, like, your why questions can lead you to be so abstract that it's no longer connected to the how question. And then this is when you need to go down, okay, in terms of like how abstract your thinking is, and ask a few how questions. So basically, to relate back to Cassie's work, how do I pursue a happy life? Okay, like, what does it mean for me? Okay, and how do I become the professional, the parent, the spouse, the friend that I want to be? And going down and going maybe all the way back to your to-do list. Okay. But your to-do list leads you to ask why, and the why leads you to go back down to the how. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and Cassie, what would you add?
I would also, I guess, not only as a to-do lister that I want to defend us, but also I want to clarify that I wasn't suggesting that to-do lists are bad. Like, that's not like the final statement. I think that the thing to be wary of is that oftentimes the things that do really matter, again, these sort of higher order goals, don't show up on your to-do list. But if you actually can devise your list so that it does include investing in these larger pursuits, then great. But just being careful that, well, as Ayelet said, it feels good to check things off the list, giving a sense of progress, wanting to be sure that you're progressing towards things that, ultimately matter to you. Also, something to be wary of is where that sort of doing mode and checklist mode, when we sort of get into such a habit of it that it never gives us a chance to be, to sort of like, instead of thinking about what's next, of also thinking about what you're currently doing. As one sort of example of this, in one of my work with Sanford DeVoe and Colin West, we found that a simple intervention, treating your weekend like a vacation, compared to treating your weekend like a regular weekend, those who treated their weekend like a vacation when they were back at work on Monday were significantly happier than those who treated it like a regular weekend. And they enjoyed the weekend more. Now, the question is like, why? Did they spend their time in different ways? And yes, they did spend their time in slightly different ways, but that didn't actually predict their happiness when they returned to work. The thing that did was their mindset. So those who were treating their weekend like a vacation were more present. They were more engaged during the time that they were spending. And I think that sort of picks up on the fact that our weekends are meant to be breaks. These are meant to be breaks from the grind of the week so that we can return to work on Monday feeling refreshed and re-engaged and motivated. But this doing mode that sort of like colors our week and drives us in our week, which is really helpful and important, when that carries over into the weekend such that you're continuing still in doing mode, but the doing is like household chores. The doing is like all of a sudden your social engagements turn into social obligations of like things that you're checking off your list as well, that you're moving through it, thinking about what's next without actually enjoying that time that you're spending. So you're missing the break. And what vacations are is that break that we need in order to not get burnt out, to continue to be motivated more broadly in our life. And so I think something to be sort of cautious of, or not cautious of, but just actually intentional about. It's like, when during my week am I going to be in doing mode? And actually, when am I going to carve out these spaces that are, you can get into a vacation mindset, that are true breaks, such that it allows you to be in the present. It allows you to be creative and thoughtful and, like slow down, maybe even relax. But I think it's important to carve out those times amidst the doing that we're so perpetually in.
So if I can expand and ask a follow-up with that. So people think about a vacation, and you get to go once a year. And for those with kids, it's like not really a vacation sometimes because you're worried about navigating them, in the whole world of stuff. So what you're saying there is that every weekend should be a vacation mindset. And then we know we've got, kids with stuff and things we're doing too. If you were going to be incorporating this space for being instead of just doing, is that there should be ideally, some every day, some once a week? And is there a minimum amount of time that someone needs to invest in the being for it to have these positive effects for them?
Yeah. And it's a really good point, because I would actually say that if it's like all of every weekend, that you're like making this, that might not work for you. So I would say, in terms of quantity, I don't have clear guidance, but I would say about being intentional of like, and maybe even it's not even the whole weekend, because yes, actually there are household chores that and errands that you do need to do. But relegating parts of the weekend, or even, evenings during the week, or unevening, each week, where you get your true break, treat it like a vacation, so that you're not sort of spending all of your time in this thinking about what's next and planning, doing mode. So I know your question was really about quantity and spacing, probably, of carving out this being time. And I don't have very directive, sort of clear guidance on that, other than just making sure being intentional and carving out some time, at least once a week, maybe. And also, I also want to point out that this is not guidance to not go on vacation.
Mm-hmm,
like real vacation. This is just making sure that it's not only on that, 1 week or 2 weeks each year that you're giving yourself the true break. Research shows that vacation is correlated with greater creativity, greater job engagement, greater job satisfaction, and happiness or life satisfaction as well. So I don't want to, and we as Americans actually are really bad at taking vacation. More than half of Americans don't take all of their paid vacation days. So I don't want to suggest that people should not take actual vacation, but I am also adding that even amidst the course of our regular weekly lives, to take breaks and real breaks, like disconnect from all of those to-dos, so that you get the recharge that you need.
Mm-hmm. Ayelet, do you have anything to add on to that thought?
We are thinking about what kind of resolutions people should have and what kind of goals they should plan to pursue. So a couple of thoughts about that. First, when we look at what people want to achieve next year, the biggest things are things that will promote their health, so physical health, mental health, eating better, exercising more. Financial goals, okay, people want to save more to get out of debt, to get jobs, to get promotions. We see some people mentioning relationship goals and being more active in society. And I think that part of our discussion right now is how to create the right balance. And one thing that we encourage people to do is basically to draw their goal system. Okay? And like, what are the main goals that you have in life? They can be financial, professional, health, society. What are the means, the activities that help you achieve these goals, and how can you create more coherence in your goal system, so that you think about your activities as supporting each other, and your goals as complementing each other, and not so much as conflicting. So how to get it to balance out, okay, so that leisure is a way to get energized to do your work, and work is a way to maybe save money so that you can better enjoy your leisure. And like this idea of finding the balance and thinking about the different things that you want to achieve in terms of complementing and balancing is particularly important nowadays. It's one of the most common questions that I get when I talk to employees, and I say nowadays because this is the era when many of us are working for at least part of our workday from home. Okay, and the boundaries between weekend and weekday, no, they are no longer quite there, right? So when I'm at work, when I'm not, when I'm a parent versus an employee, this is all kind of together, and this requires more thoughtfulness in how we are going to organize everything. Other comment is that there are also a bunch of things that we want to do less of. Okay, so as much as we never have enough time for the things that we want to do, we also have many things that we don't want to do. And part of organizing our mental list for the new year is thinking about how we are going to change that. So I'm being reminded of a conversation that I recently had with a manager who told me that the way to relax is by having a couple of glasses of wine by the end of the day, and they wish that the way to relax was by exercising at the beginning of the day. Okay, now the solution is there, right? Instead of taking the hour by the end of the day, take the hour at the beginning of the day. And so you will be exercising maybe instead of drinking, at least for some of the days. And this is a solution. Okay. This is just restructuring your day in a way that makes more sense for the different goals that you have for yourself for the week, for the year, so on.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit about businesses there, Ayelet, and for employees and things. So as this is the Brainy business, it's always good to be, bringing some of that aspect in. Do you have any tips or advice that you've given to managers or people in companies to be able to encourage their teams maybe to either be happier, to be more likely to be more productive, more engaged, using some of the tips? And of course, this question is for you both.
Yes, this is a really exciting time to be a behavioral scientist, because we collect data on how people do it and how do they do it when they have a less imposed structure. And one of the findings that we keep seeing is that employees can be quite productive from home. So there is generally people are productive, and this is the good news. The less good news is that it takes longer to complete certain tasks, and so we see that often people have to work longer hours because they are not quite focused in a way that they could when life was more clearly organized around the time in the office and the time at home. And the two things that suffer most from the way we reorganized our workday, which by the way also has many benefits for many people, but the two things tend to suffer are teamwork and learning. Okay? As it turned out, it is harder to learn when you are not with the people that you need to learn from. And Cassie and I are in the business of teaching. We are professors, so we learned firsthand that it's really hard to do it when the students are not in the classroom with you. And it's harder to work with other people. It's harder to have a productive conversation. It's harder to work with other people where you're not quite seeing how they work. And so when we think about solutions, well, maybe technology will be so much better this year, and maybe the world will figure out how to do things remotely in a better way. In the meantime, we should think about carving time for learning and for teamwork that is more in person. And so for many of us, we will need to get a bit more in person than maybe we were over the last year.
Yeah. Cassie, what would you add to that?
Yeah, and I would add to that this another thing that has sort of has suffered from working from home is just a sense of connection and friendship among colleagues. So yes, it makes us less collaborative and it hurts teamwork, but it also makes us less engaged and happy in the work that we do. And from that, we feel more, where folks are seeing more disengagement from the organization and from their work. There's a sort of funny at the face of it question that was in the Gallup poll a few years ago, which asked, do you have a best friend at work? And only 2 out of 10 Americans said that they had a best friend at work. And the reason I say it's funny, because it sounds like something my 4th grade son would ask, like, do you have a best friend? Only 2 out of 10 Americans reported that they have a best friend at work, but those who did were twice as more engaged. They were better performers. They experienced greater job satisfaction, which translates into life satisfaction. Also, greater job satisfaction is predictive of, or lower job satisfaction is predictive of absenteeism and turnover and leaving. So I would say that, as we're talking about potential resolutions or behaviors to change into the coming year, or at least be thoughtful and intentional about investing in. And that is developing friendship with colleagues and it's so hard to do it through Zoom, but figuring out ways, or, like I know that some folks have organizations and businesses are doing a hybrid where they have particular days where people come in, but just saying that you need to be in 2 days a week doesn't actually help the coordination of bringing folks together in an opportunity to develop that friendship, to grab lunch together, to grab coffee, to have those conversations, the sort of chat that happens in the same room as a meeting is going to be starting, or as you're leaving a particular meeting. That doesn't happen on Zoom. So I think that if there is a potential sort of idea about what one might do as an individual, as well as a manager, when you might consider about investing in relationships.
And with regard to that, well, many people have as their New Year resolution to find a different job. So if you're going to look for a different job, think about your new job as something that needs to satisfy 3 goals. One is the social goal. That you need to work with people that you like. You need to get along with your coworkers. You need to have friendships. Another one is that you need to do something that grows you as a person. You need to do something that is interesting, that is meaningful, that develops your skills. And then the third one, you already know. You probably need to be able to pay your bills with that job. So 3 things to consider.
Perfect. Well, as we wrap up here, I could definitely talk to you both for much longer. Thankfully, Cassie, I get to talk with you again here very soon, and everyone can be listening in on that. I have one question for each of you that you get a 1-word answer for, right? We get the yes, no, or sometimes, which is, do you set New Year's resolutions? Ayelet?
Yes.
Cassie?
No.
And I guess maybe we'll have a follow-up some other time to say why yes, why no, but we'll leave it there.
What about you, Melina?
I was going to say sometimes, but I'm actually going to say no. I don't do New Year's resolutions. And now, like I said, we'll have a follow-up conversation as to why we do or don't do them. I guess it would be, Ayelet, tell us why you set New Year's resolutions as we wrap up. Cassie and I can talk about it again later.
I set New Year's resolutions because it's an opportunity to think about what I want to achieve, what I want to do. It's an opportunity to engage in this mindful process that we just described here, which is thinking about what was great last year, what didn't go so well, what have I learned from both, and where do I want to go. So no, I take any opportunity to have this goal-setting session with myself, and New Year is a wonderful time to do that.
Love it. Love it. Well, everyone will have to tune in for my episode with Cassie, which will be coming out in a couple weeks. We'll talk more about this then. And of course, there are links in the show notes for everyone to get in touch with both Ayelet and with Cassie to get their books, to learn more, and to be able to follow up. And for now, I will just say thank you both so much for joining me on this panel of sorts to talk about having a great 2023 and beyond.
Well, thanks for having us. And when I guess folks are listening, Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you again to Dr. Ayelet Fishbach and Dr. Cassie Holmes for joining me on the show today. What got your brain buzzing in today's conversation? For me, I'm most focused on how fun this new style of episode was. As I said at the beginning of the show, I'm planning to look for other opportunities to bring in guests who don't necessarily know each other to have a panel discussion or debate on a certain topic. I think it's an interesting way to have a more robust discussion and give you all a peek behind the curtain into the minds of these amazing people who are kind enough to join me here on the Brainy Business. This lets us all learn from each other and see how insights from different fields can work together to help us do all sorts of things. In this case, it's achieving goals and having a great 2023. I also thought it was funny and fascinating that we had a split between who sets resolutions and who doesn't. As you heard, Cassie and I don't, and you will hear more about why when she's back on the show in a couple of weeks. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss that episode when it comes out. For me, I prefer not to be bound to only make changes or do big, important things at a single time of the year. I want to be able to do big things whenever it makes sense to do so, which could be at any time. One thing I do like to do annually is to choose a word of the year. This is a theme that can guide me throughout the year and keep me centered on what I want to accomplish. My word for 2022 was content/content. A focus on creating great content that makes me and everyone who encounters it content. I think I achieved that and look forward to hearing your thoughts as well as your word of the year, should you choose to pick one. I have a post on LinkedIn talking about this, just like I did last year, and can't wait to hear your word there. I'm still at the time of this recording deciding my final word for 2023, but at this point, I think I might stick with the same one. I'm not sure that I'm done with it just yet. But you'll know for sure when the episode goes live and you check that LinkedIn post that will be there for you in the show notes. Please do share your word of the year. Or if you do have big resolutions or goals, if that's what you like to do, if that's your style, there's clearly nothing wrong with that. It's a whatever works for you. Or if you're considering a word of the year, trying it the first time, or if you've been doing it for years, whatever it is, come share it with me anywhere on the socials. You can find me as The Brainy Biz pretty much everywhere, and as Melina Palmer on LinkedIn via the Brainy Bites newsletter is where I will be including that post about the word of the year. And don't forget, there are other links to related past episodes, like Ayelet's first time on the show, as well as related books from both of our panelists and others, along with ways to get in contact with Cassie and Ayelet, all in the show notes for the episode, which are waiting for you in the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/249. As we close out the show and the year, I want to thank you for supporting the Brainy Business. Whether this is your first episode or you've been here for all 249 and everywhere in between, I appreciate you more than I can possibly say. Thank you for listening, subscribing, sharing, rating, and leaving reviews of the show. Thank you for everyone who has ordered and read one or both of my books, or taken a class, or if we've done work together, or if you've seen me in a presentation that you attended, or you've reached out on social media or sent an email. However we've connected, even if we haven't met yet, I appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And here's to another year and 250 more episodes together. And thank you again to Ayelet Fishbach and Cassie Holmes for joining me on the show today. It was a delight to chat with and learn from you. Join me Tuesday to learn all about another great tactic for achieving goals, temptation bundling. It's going to be a lot of fun. You won't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Melina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.